My father is an avid environmentalist, and so as children, he would pull us and take us on tree walks, on walks into the Sanjay Gandhi National Park in Mumbai, and so on. So I've grown up with a healthy love and respect, deep respect for trees. And one of my favorite trees, single, like an actual tree individual, was this old, I think 100-plus-year-old mango tree in my Mysore house. And it had this one branch on which I would just be hanging out. Almost all my summer afternoons, summer holidays afternoons, I would be on that branch of that tree. And so I think just being close to a tree, I think for many of us, it's something quite special and very emotional.
That's so true. I still remember those sun soaked summers spent swinging on the banyan tree near my house. Its broad, sheltering branches weren't just a playground, they were a world of wonder, a keeper of secrets, and a source of countless memories. Trees have this incredible way of weaving themselves into the fabric of our lives, often without us even realizing it. Hi, I'm Kartika, a fellow learner who's excited by all things heritage and is forever curious to know more about the many forms in which heritage shapes our everyday lives. This time, I joined Team Inherit on an extraordinary journey to uncover the stories, histories, and emotions that trees quietly hold within them. These majestic giants have been such a constant presence in our landscape that we often take them for granted. But wait until you hear the tales I've uncovered. You'll find yourself in awe of these ancient, silent witnesses to our history, culture, and lives.
Trees play a huge role in cities and really across all kinds of economic status. So I'll give you a few examples depending on where we look. For instance, there's a growing movement in Bangalore of having these reading book clubs in parks in weekends. So people come to Lal Bagh or Cubbon Park or a smaller HSR park. You bring your own book and you read in the company of other readers. But how lovely it is to have that park to de-stress. There are parents who will come with their children for walks. Again, this is a lovely public place, right? Where do you go in a city? You can't walk on the road. It's really polluted and there's traffic and it's not safe. So where do you go with your children? Then there are places where low income communities want to get firewood, for instance, or they want to get, in Bangalore, they collect the seed of a tree called honge. And that they sell it, or they make oil themselves, which is used for lighting lamps. So like a livelihood for women to practice. And then there are other kinds of flowers and trees, tamarind trees, mango trees, children pluck and play with them. If you go to slums, their playground is not the playground with a tree. That's why they're climbing up and down the branches. But it's also the cradle where many working mothers will tie a sari to the branch. We see this everywhere, right? And there's a baby that is being rocked to sleep there while the mother is working or cooking or doing something next to the baby. So trees play a huge role in all kinds of income categories.
Trees are more than just silent companions. They are living archives of history, culture, and memory. But what makes a tree truly iconic?
An iconic tree is an individual tree that stands out for some reason apart from all other trees. If you have a whole, community of banyans, maybe one banyan stands out for some reason, or one baobab stands out apart from all others because of something that arrests your interest, that catches your imagination. And it is different from all the trees. You can be overawed by looking at it. You can feel full of emotion by looking at it. But very seldom iconic trees leave you unmoved. The oldest tree in India is actually a tree which grows in Lahore Spiti region of Himachal Pradesh. And it's actually a kind of cedar which grows there. And when it was studied, the tree was 2023 years old. Now imagine what would be happening in the world at that time. Alright? So for me, age is one of the criteria you could use to classify iconic trees. It could also be dimensions, something which is outstanding dimension, the tallest, the largest, the widest, the biggest, etc., etc. So, thirdly, they could be outstanding because of some interest, botanical interest. They may be botanical oddballs. There may be something unusual about them in terms of botanical features, for example, or biological features. There is a tree near Bangalore, Hoskote, where uh, this banyan tree hosts more than 600 or 630 beehives on it. So it has actually millions of bees colonizing on this tree. And it's a Guinness Book record. No other tree is known to have so many beehives. The largest that was known is about 200 beehives on a tree. This has more than 600 beehives on the tree. So, such kind of trees, because they stand alone and they were already thought to be gone, uh, is something that is, you can use that as one of the criteria.
It's not just their age or grandeur that makes trees iconic. Many of them hold deep religious and spiritual significance as well. Across India, trees are seen as more than flora. They're sacred symbols woven into the spiritual fabric of our lives.
There are several festivals, rituals, religious rites associated with the common people and trees. For example, the neem tree. The leaves of the neem tree are consumed along with jaggery or good in Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh on the New Year's Day. For example, they say life is a mix of the bitter and the sweet. Therefore, the neem leaves are bitter. The young emerging buds and vegetative buds and young leaves of the neem, along with jaggery. So, they represent the bitter and the sweetness of life. There are other trees, for example, the Karam festival in Assam, in Madhya Pradesh, and many other places. It is associated with the Saptaparni tree or the Alstonia scholaris tree.
So the peepal tree is worshipped across India, and in fact, the peepal is very sacred to many kind of traditions in India and cultures and religions. So the Buddha is believed to have got his enlightenment under a peepal tree, for instance. And you will see across India again a lot of peepal trees are worshipped.
So a lot of these trees within cities that I'm seeing, especially in Bangalore, where you have a neem, and a peepal, and you have this little temple at the base, or even just like a stone, kind of something at the base. So some deity, either a snake deity, the Naga deity, or some other deity at the base. And then there's this massive tree which has not been touched. So sometimes I feel like, while I myself am an atheist, I feel that this part of attaching a tree to a god, which is in the form of some kind of an idol, protects the tree, which is just wonderful, because some of these trees are really old and they're massive. Yeah, you can see the girth. I can imagine what the tree rings might look like inside, and very old trees, and they're standing in spite of all kinds of things coming up around them.
Sometimes you have an ant hill, and if there's an ant hill next to the peepal tree, again you'll see that that is also worshipped along with the peepal tree. So there are these elements of ecology. You might find a bats roosting on the peepal tree, which is again supposed to be sacred and not supposed to be touched. Or you might find monkeys that make their home on the peepal tree. And if people harass monkeys anywhere else, they're not supposed to harass them at the site of the peepal tree, because again, it's a site that is supposed to be protected. So the sacredness around it allows other creatures to flourish alongside the tree.
Trees also play a vibrant role in the cultural traditions and festivals across India, serving as living symbols of community and celebration. Take, for instance, the Vat Savitri Puja, a festival where married women in many parts of India tie sacred threads around a banyan tree. praying for their husband's longevity and prosperity. And who can forget the Kadamba tree, closely associated with Lord Krishna? During Janmashtami, it's common to hear tales of Krishna's playful childhood, where he danced and played his flute beneath the Kadamba tree, making it a cherished symbol of joy and devotion.
There are several stories that are uh, related to culture. For example, the establishment of Santiniketan by Maharshi Devendranath Thakur is associated with two chhatim trees. Chhatim is a Bengali name for a tree which we call as Saptaparni, Alstonia scholaris. The story goes that Maharshi Devendranath Tagore was traveling on a boat, in Bengal, and it was evening, so he got off and offered his evening prayers under a pair of chhatim trees. He found so much peace that he decided to buy up a few acres of land around those. And then he named it Santiniketan, or the abode of peace. Unfortunately, those ancient trees are no more. They have been now replaced by new ones. But culturally, Santiniketan celebrates and Vishwabharati celebrates the association with those trees in a very unique manner. It's a very interesting cultural connection between chhatim trees and Santiniketan.
Teej ka Tyohar in the deep Thar desert is something to be experienced because it's all around this tree. In the Thar, on my second or the third visit there, they said, "Aaj Teej ka Tyohar hai, aapko hamare saath Teej manana hi padega." I didn't know what that meant. So they said, "You have to come home with us." So I went home with one of them. They found the largest girl there, and I wore her ghagra choli and all of that traditional dress. All the others wouldn't fit me, and so they said, "Now you're dressed. Now we have to go." So we went to this place, which was a lovely khejadi tree right by a lake, which was brimming with water, rainwater harvested, and there was this jhula. So I had seen how they were doing it. Okay, so there was this guy who would hold one part of the rope and throw it up with this person and go really high, come back, and he would then throw it this side. And so there was just like this huge oscillation, and you were really high. Okay, you would have been about 20-30 feet high and I was like, I can't do this. But I did. I didn't scream. But I just realized that it was such a celebration, because when you went up, you went almost into the canopy of the tree, and you were looking down, and you know now what the tree must be seeing when it looks down, It was just a fabulous experience, and I didn't want it to stop actually in the end, but then I had to get off because other people wanted to take their turns to swing.
These cultural connections highlight how deeply trees are rooted in our traditions, reminding us of their integral role in our collective identity. But trees aren't just cultural symbols, they also have ecological and scientific significance. And to truly appreciate their importance, it helps to understand the different kinds of trees around us. Natural natives that belong to our landscapes, endemic species found nowhere else in the world, exotic ones brought from distant lands, and even invasive species that disrupt local ecosystems. Each category tells its own story and adds to the complex tapestry of our environment.
Native trees are trees that grow naturally in a geographical location. There are many trees that are native to India. There are trees that are native to other countries, and these grow in our country. They may also spread to other countries. They may have a wider geographical area which crosses over to other countries geographically. Because political boundaries and ecological boundaries are different. There are also trees that have been introduced almost into every country from other countries. And this is one of the results of colonialism, what we call imperialism. We have a lot of trees that have been introduced into our country by a whole range of people that came to India: the Portuguese, the British, the Dutch, and Mughals, of course, brought several trees into this country. Even during pre-Mughal days, uh, new trees, new species have been introduced into this country through the Indian Ocean trade route, and so on and so forth. Some of them have also become naturalized. They have also become part of our culture.
There's a lot of discussion about what is native and what is exotic species, and it's a very hard, it seems like a very simple, straightforward discussion when you read about it in the papers. Native is good, exotic is bad, but it's really much more complex than that. So what is native, what is exotic, and what is naturalized? Somehow we have a social, and this is part of human evolution, preference for what is our own, and we think foreign is not necessarily good, and there are always boundaries we draw. Some of that social prejudice may have also filtered down to our ecological prejudice about native and exotic. So for instance, in some areas it's more clear cut. Let's take the eucalyptus. It's a favorite of in many India social forestry programs. In fact, Tipu Sultan in areas around Bangalore was supposed to have been the person who first brought the eucalyptus to India. And it's a very good tree for some things like matchboxes and paper pulp and things like that. And it grows very fast. You can make a lot of eucalyptus oil from it. And it's left its pests behind, which is typically what happens with exotic trees. They travel and their pests don't travel with them. So it grows very fast. And but it's also known to have problems with water table because they say that it sucks up a lot of water. Right? So if you plant a lot of eucalyptus on a lake bed, for instance, in the name of forestry, that's not a good thing. But other places it gets far more difficult. You talk about the gulmohar, which has been there for 150 years, or the tebubuyas, which have been in Bangalore for 150, 200 years. The butterflies are adapted to it, the bees are adapted to it, monkeys are eating the blossoms, so are many other kinds of squirrels and various other animals. So what do you do with a tree like this? Do you say it's naturalized? That's sort of the rule of thumb. And how long does a tree need to be here before it's naturalized? Rule of thumb, let's say it's been here for 150 years. If any of us have been in a city for that long, we would say we are part of the city, right? It gets even more complicated with native. So the Nagalinga Pushpa tree, for instance, is 15th century or thereabouts. It came to India. It's not native, but we call it a favorite of Shiva's. It's there in most Shiva temples. What we call the cannonball tree, otherwise, right? And because the flower is shaped like a naga, like a linga. Right? So, what would you do with that tree?
Everybody thought that the chinar, today, Kashmiris feel that chinar represents Kashmiriyat. That is the essence of Kashmir. But actually the chinar is also an alien. It's a foreigner which came to Kashmir from Persia and so on and so far beyond. So it all depends upon how long they have been here, how far they were able to penetrate into our cultural, religious, or other, domains.
Even more complicated than the tamarind, we think of it, it's called Tamarindus indica. That's the botanical name, but it's not from India. Okay, it came from Africa, and then the Arab traders found it and thought it was Indian, so they popularized it, calling it Tamarindus indica. So where are you going to draw the line with that? It's been around from 800 AD onwards. And the coconut, we believe, came floating along on some island floor, some mass, and then it came from there to some of the islands near the coast of India and eventually made its way to Kerala. It's also not native. Maybe not brought by a human being, but it floated along. But the coconut is such an indispensable part of India now, right? Where are you going to think of the coconut as not being Indian? And so that becomes a real challenge. When you're drawing these lines between native and exotic, we have to say, okay, I don't think anybody is going to argue that the coconut should be removed from India because it's exotic, or tamarind should go away from India because it's exotic. So I think we have to be careful about how we draw these lines.
Some of them have also become invasive. Invasive means they're growing wherever they were not intended to grow, right? And therefore they pose a danger to the natural or naturally occurring flora and fauna. One of the best examples everybody knows about is lantana, which is not a tree, but it's a shrubby kind of habitat it has. It was imported originally to act as a host for sandalwood trees, and it became an escape from cultivation. And today it poses a very great problem in many forests. However, I must add that all exotic species are not invasive. Many of them are useful, and they have become part and parcel of our uh, urban scapes.
Each tree category contributes uniquely to our ecosystems and cultural fabric. But what happens when we overlook their value? This brings us to a pressing issue: the importance of recognizing trees as heritage. Despite their profound cultural, ecological, and historical significance, trees are often an afterthought in urban planning and development. Centuries old trees are cut down to make way for roads and buildings, erasing silent witnesses to our history and identity.
We hardly consult people what they want. When we make a road, for example, we just indiscriminately go and cut trees on the sides without even knowing their cultural significance or heritage significance or historical significance or whatever else. So there is always a mutual relationship between trees and people. Trees provide shade, for example. In a city like Delhi, in the hot summer, when you are walking on the road, and the moment you find the shade of a tree, it is such heavenly feeling, you know. Uh, Trees also provide barriers to unnecessary sound from traffic and so on. If you plant a large number of trees, they are involved in carbon sequestration and therefore in our war against climate change. uh, we can connect them in a number of ways, culturally, as ancestors to our past, or living beings that have actually witnessed past events, whether they are personal to us or they are events that we relate to in history or mythology or religion or anywhere. It is possible that some tree has been planted by our own grandfather, for instance. So we relate to that tree in a very different way.
The other thing about heritage, about natural heritage, is that it's not in our national parks. It's not just in our national parks. Of course, national parks are great, and they're important, but even your own backyard and what you plant in it, native varieties of trees, which will then be host plants and trees for maybe butterflies or bees and all of that, is a heritage, is natural heritage. Especially, for example, if you're building a house and you're building it around an existing old tree, or you're building a temple and you're building it around an existing old tree, this is heritage, and once lost, very hard to it can never be regained. Yeah, you may be able to replant a tree, but it's going to take 100 years for it to come back to the same level of importance as this one garners, even with all the other creatures that use it. So even even that old baobab that has been cut down very recently in Mumbai, is a loss of heritage. And I think until we recognize that more tarmac in exchange for old trees is not a great bargain. It's actually a loss-making venture, really. We need to rethink that mindset, completely.
With Indian cities growing so fast, heritage is something that we're losing, and we lose heritage buildings almost every day, and we have a lot of discussion about it and a lot of public anguish, as there should be. But we're also losing heritage trees every day and heritage ecosystems every day, and we don't talk about that at all. And some of these trees are living legends with memories. You just simply can't replace them by planting saplings. Similarly, in the Adyar the Theosophical Society in Adyar in Chennai, you have a very large banyan tree which is also centuries old, which is a living heritage, right? So it's protected there. And in Mumbai, in the fort area, you have a tree that was supposed to be planted by Livingstone, the explorer. So you have Livingstone's tree, but Livingstone's tree is chopped. The branches get chopped, and you wonder when the branches are getting chopped so brutally once every few years, nobody's protecting this heritage tree. What if it gets a disease and an infection, and nobody knows about the heritage of this tree? So you're talking about the fort area in Mumbai and saying there are all these heritage buildings that need to be protected, but nobody is looking at this tree and its importance in this area. Right? So some of these we really need to be thinking of how do we document heritage trees and have a roster of these heritage trees, maybe do public walks, put a sign, tell people where they are, and that's the only way I think if the public starts seeing it and asking for its protection, then these trees will be protected.
In spite of all the importance of trees that I mentioned, uh, unfortunately, we don't include trees when we make our plans for either urban development or development period. We take them for granted, and our planning process does not include trees or their protection. That's never our primary concern. In any development projects, uh, trees are the first casualties. Whether it is road building, building of the metros or trains and so on, trees are the first to go. The tragedy is that we don't even have an inventory of our important iconic trees. Therefore, we are losing our iconic trees without even knowing where they are, what is their importance, and so on. Therefore, my suggestion is that first and foremost, we must make a heritage tree register or an iconic tree register, starting from the district level, and then the state level, and then the national level. And in this cannot happen just with a top-down approach. This has to be a process in which the communities are actively involved. They must appreciate the value of these trees, and with appreciation actually comes ownership. They must own this whole process of protection, and they must buy into this process, and then this results in conservation and handing over this legacy to the generations that follow ours.
So it's really unfortunate. I really feel that urban landscapers, it would be so beautiful for them to be able to get an education maybe in why plant certain trees and why not plant certain trees. And I think it'll behoove all of us, anybody building a home garden, right? What trees do you plant? What trees shouldn't you plant? What could you stay away from? What could you choose instead of something else?
The big challenge for India's urban growth is how do we still find places for trees? And the thing is, we have to keep that as the center and plan urban development around that, as opposed to planning the urban development and then squeezing in trees or removing trees as an afterthought. Look at any road planning decision in India, or a metro or a highway or any kind of urban infrastructure. First, you design it based on engineering aspects. Where should the road go? Then you say, oh, there was a wetland here, it's going to cut through the Yamuna basin, or there was a old centuries old heritage tree here. Sorry, there's no space for it, it has to go. If you instead kept the tree in the center and said, let the road go around it, or let your other infrastructure development protect this patch of trees, then you would have a very different way of planning, which can be done. It's just that it's never done that way in terms of urban planning. So the first thing we need to protect to make sure that there's space for trees is to keep the old trees that we have. We can't replace them by planting new trees, because to get a sapling that reaches anywhere near the size and the environmental benefits of a tree, of a fully grown tree, takes 20 to 30 years. And what do citizens do with in polluted cities till then, right? You can't wait that long. That's one part of it. But while we do that, we also need to think there will be places where trees have to be cut. In which case, we need to follow the approach that China or Thailand or Malaysia or many of these Southeast Asian countries take, which is of transplanting trees. It's a little more expensive, but I'm sure we could spend on that when we're spending crores on trees. We could spend a lakh on transplant, a crore on roads. We can spend an extra lakh on transplanting a tree, which means you need to dig the entire root, the area below the root, and take this tree to another place. So you at least, you have the development, but you can save the tree.
If you Ask a friend who has just, for example, come back from, let's say, Jim Corbett. He or she will tell you how many tigers they saw, which are the birds that he saw. If you turn around and ask them how many outstanding trees or species of trees that they noticed or which came to their notice, most of them would draw a blank and say, oh, I just didn't, I don't remember anymore. Because we treat trees as a background for other kinds of life to happen. Animals, birds are seen in the background, and we treat trees as a green background against which the rest of the life plays out. Which is sad, because if we don't have trees, we don't have the other kind of life either on this planet. And therefore, trees are that much more importance to our life.